The lunch tray crashed to the floor with a clatter. Pasta sauce splattering across my sneakers like arterial spray. Blake loomed over me, his cruel laughter echoing through the cafeteria as 300 sets of eyes witnessed my utter humiliation. What they couldn't possibly fathom was that my father possessed the power to erase Blake's entire existence with a single, precise shot from 800 yards away. Don't forget to like, subscribe for more tales of betrayal, and leave your location in the comments. I'm Ethan, and I've been burdened with a secret heavier than the relentless bruises Blake inflicts on my ribs every Tuesday and Thursday following gym class. "Just look at this pathetic loser," Blake sneered, grinding his boot into my spilled meal. "Can't even hold a tray without trembling like a little girl." I remained on my knees, attempting to salvage the scattered food while students around me pulled out their phones. Another viral spectacle, courtesy of Blake Morrison, the undisputed king of Roosevelt High. Another day of crushing shame for me. "My dad says your dad's probably some deadbeat who took off," Blake continued, his voice cutting sharply through the cafeteria's din. "That's why you're such a weak piece of garbage." If only he knew the truth. My father, Jay Coleman, dedicated 12 years of his life as a Special Forces sniper. He completed 2 tours in Afghanistan and 1 in Iraq. He boasts 47 confirmed kills and a chest full of medals, locked away in a box he mistakenly believes I don't know about. This is the man who tucks me into bed each night and crafts pancakes every Sunday morning. The same man who once held a Taliban commander's life in his crosshairs for 6 uninterrupted hours, awaiting the perfect shot. Yet I am forbidden to reveal any of this to anyone. Dad extracted a promise from me. "Violence doesn't achieve anything, son," he instructed me 3 months ago when the bullying first began. "There are always more effective ways to resolve conflict." Easy for him to say. He's never endured being shoved into lockers or having his head forcefully submerged in toilet water while others laughed and recorded it. I gathered the last remnants of my ruined lunch and slowly rose to my feet. Blake's cronies, 3 aspiring tough guys who wouldn't last 5 minutes in my father's world, formed a tight circle around me. "Where are you heading, Coleman?" Blake demanded, grabbing my shoulder, his fingers digging precisely into the spot where he had punched me just yesterday. "I'm not finished speaking with you." "Just leave me alone," I whispered, despising the feebleness of my own voice. Blake's face twisted into that familiar cruel smirk. "What did you say? Speak up, little mouse." The cafeteria had fallen into complete silence. Even the lunch ladies had paused their serving to observe the unfolding drama. My heart pounded against my ribs as Blake leaned in closer, his breath hot against my ear. "Your daddy isn't here to protect you," he murmured. "And he never will be, because he's probably rotting in some ditch somewhere, like the worthless soldier trash he was." Something cold and sharp twisted inside my chest. Dad wasn't dead. Dad was very much alive. And if Blake only knew what those steady hands had accomplished overseas, what those calm eyes had witnessed through a sniper scope. But I bit my tongue and walked away, just as Dad had taught me. That evening, I sat at the dinner table, idly picking at Mom's meatloaf while Dad inquired about my day. My mother, Linda, worked as a nurse at the county hospital. She encountered enough violence and pain in her profession. She certainly didn't need to hear about mine. "School was fine," I lied, "same as every other day." Dad's gray eyes scrutinized my face. At 42, he still possessed the physical prowess to run 20 miles and then accurately hit a target from 1,000 yards. His dark hair was meticulously cropped short, military style, and there was an indefinable quality in his demeanor that most people couldn't quite place. But I recognized it immediately. It was the quiet, unwavering confidence of a man who had repeatedly confronted death and emerged victorious. "Ethan," he said softly, "you know, you can confide in me about anything, right?" I nodded, forcing a smile. "Yeah, Dad, I know." Later that night, I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, my ribs aching from where Blake had accidentally elbowed me in the hallway. Through the thin walls, I could discern Dad in his workshop, likely cleaning one of his hunting rifles or sharpening his knives. What Blake and the others failed to comprehend was that my father had dedicated years to mastering the art of neutralizing threats with surgical precision. He had been meticulously trained by the world's foremost military strategists to assess, plan, and eliminate seemingly insurmountable problems. Yet, instead of deploying these extraordinary skills, he chose to make pancakes, assist with homework, and feign ignorance of his son's daily torment at school. As I gradually drifted off to sleep, a singular thought resonated persistently in my mind. For how long could a decorated killer sustain the pretense of being an ordinary suburban dad? And what cataclysmic event would unfold when that meticulously controlled facade finally shattered? The bathroom mirror offered no illusions. Splotches of purple blossomed across my ribs like grotesque flowers, and the cut on my lip had reopened during lunch. I pressed a damp paper towel against it, watching the water swirl pink down the drain. Blake had truly outdone himself today. "Please tell me you fought back," my reflection seemed to whisper. But we both understood the sobering truth. I had endured every punch, every kick, every demeaning word without retaliating even once. The bathroom door abruptly slammed open, causing me to jump. Blake swaggered in with his characteristic arrogance, flanked by his usual entourage, Connor, Derek, and Matt, 3 individuals who would undoubtedly wet themselves if they ever encountered my father. "Well, well," Blake drawled, "looks like little Ethan's attempting to clean up his mess." I kept my head down, hoping they would simply use the facilities and depart. But Blake was far from finished with me today. "You know what your problem is, Coleman?" He seized my shoulder and spun me around. "You believe you're superior to everyone else? Walking around all quiet and mysterious like you possess some profound secret." If only he realized how accurate he truly was. "I don't think I'm better than anyone," I mumbled. Blake's hand lashed out faster than I anticipated, slapping me across the face. The resounding crack echoed off the bathroom tiles like a gunshot. My cheek burned, but I exhibited no reaction. "Look at me when I'm speaking to you." I raised my eyes to meet his. For a fleeting instant, something flickered across his face. Perhaps surprise that I wasn't weeping or bleeding. But it vanished quickly, replaced by that familiar, cruel grin. "That's better," he declared. "Now, here's how things are going to proceed. You're going to bring me $50 tomorrow, or I'm going to make today seem like a birthday celebration." "I don't have $50. Blake's fist connected with my stomach, doubling me over. As I gasped for breath, he grabbed a handful of my hair and yanked my head upwards. "Then you'd better find it, loser. Ask Mommy and Daddy for some lunch money. Or better yet, his grip tightened. Maybe I'll pay them a visit myself and explain how their pathetic son needs to learn some respect. Something cold and dangerous sparked in my mind. An image of Blake knocking on our front door, blissfully unaware that the quiet man who answered had once eradicated an entire Taliban cell with nothing but a knife and 40 minutes of darkness. But I forcibly suppressed the thought. Dad had made his choice. Peace over violence. Pancakes over precision strikes. Leave my parents out of this, I stated quietly. Blake laughed and shoved me backward. My head struck the mirror with a loud crack, and I slumped to the floor. Through blurred vision, I watched the four of them exit, their laughter receding down the hallway. I remained there for 10 minutes, awaiting the dissipation of the dizziness. When I finally managed to stand, I observed that the mirror displayed a spider web of cracks radiating from the point where my head had impacted it. 7 years of bad luck, my grandmother used to say. But I was already living it. The walk home felt exceptionally long. With each step, sharp pains radiated through my ribs, and I could taste blood from biting my tongue. When I finally reached our tranquil suburban street, I paused at the mailbox, bracing myself to confront my parents. Our house appeared so utterly normal from the exterior. A white picket fence, flower boxes beneath the windows, Dad's truck parked in the driveway. No one would ever suspect that the man residing there had once crawled through enemy territory for 3 consecutive days to eliminate a high-value target. I slipped through the front door as noiselessly as possible, hoping to reach my room undetected. But Dad was already waiting in the living room, seated in his cherished armchair with a cup of coffee and yesterday's newspaper. "Hey, buddy," he greeted without looking up. "How was school?" "Fine," I lied, keeping my face averted. "That's good to hear." He folded the paper and placed it aside. "Your mom's working late at the hospital tonight, so it's just us for dinner. I was thinking we could order pizza." And then he stopped mid-sentence. When I glanced over, his gray eyes were fixated on my face, absorbing every detail with the same intense scrutiny he had once employed to study enemy positions through a scope. "Ethan," his voice had undergone a complete transformation. The gentle suburban dad tone had vanished, replaced by something cold and sharp. "Come here." I attempted to evade his gaze, but there was no concealing the damage Blake had inflicted. The cut lip, the bruised cheek, the way I instinctively clutched my ribs. Dad's trained eyes missed nothing. He rose slowly, his movements controlled and predatory. In that moment, he no longer resembled a middle-aged insurance salesman. He looked precisely like what he once was, a weapon meticulously designed by the U.S. military to eradicate threats with extreme prejudice. "Who did this to you?" The question emerged as barely more than a whisper, yet something in his tone sent shivers down my spine. For the first time in months, I comprehended why enemy combatants had so profoundly feared the ghost sniper, who could kill them from impossible distances. My father wasn't merely angry. He was calculating trajectories. "It was just an accident, Dad," I whispered. But the lie crumbled beneath his unwavering stare. Jay Coleman stepped closer, and I watched 12 years of his carefully constructed civilian facade melt away like snow in summer. His shoulders squared into a predator's stance, his head tilting slightly, the very same angle he had once used to line up impossible shots through a rifle scope. "Son," he said quietly, I've witnessed enough accidents to instantly recognize them, and this certainly isn't one. With surprising tenderness, he reached out, gently tilting my chin upwards, surveying the damage with the detached precision of someone who once evaluated battlefield wounds under live fire. As his fingers traced the outline of my bruised cheek, I caught a fleeting glimpse of something in his eyes. A profound darkness I had never encountered before. "Tell me his name." It wasn't a question, but a command. "Dad, please. You always taught me that violence never solves anything. Tell me his name." "Ethan." The way he uttered my name sent a ripple of unease through me. This was no longer just the father who made me pancakes and helped with my homework. This was Sergeant J. Coleman, the legendary ghost sniper, renowned for holding the record for the longest confirmed kill shot in his unit. "Blake Morrison," I whispered, and Dad gave a single nod, mentally filing the information away in what I imagined was the same internal database he once used to track enemy targets. He then moved to the kitchen window, gazing out at our tranquil suburban street, his hands clasped behind his back. "How long has this been occurring?" 3 months. And you didn't inform me because—" I swallowed hard. "Because you always maintained there were better ways to resolve conflict. Because you left all that military life behind when you returned home." A prolonged silence followed. When Dad finally spoke, his voice was barely audible. "I did leave it behind, Ethan. I had to. Do you have any idea what I did over there? What they trained me to do?" I nodded. Years ago, I had discovered his hidden metal box in the back of his closet, filled with a bronze star, a silver star, a purple heart, commendations for valor under fire, and citations for missions that remained classified. "I was exceptionally good at it," he continued, his gaze still fixed on the window. "Too good. I could thread a bullet through a playing card at 800 yards. I could tail a target for days without being detected. I could neutralize threats that other soldiers couldn't even approach." He turned to face me, and for the first time, I truly saw the immense burden he had carried through the years. But with every trigger pull, a part of me died too. Every confirmed kill, every completed mission, carved something irreplaceable from my soul. Dad walked heavily to the kitchen table and sank into a chair. "When I returned home, when I met you, Mother, when you were born, I believed I could bury that part of myself forever. I thought I could simply be an ordinary dad in a typical town, living a normal life." "You are an ordinary dad," I asserted, though even as the words left my lips, I knew they weren't entirely true. "No, son, I'm not. I'm a predator masquerading as a family man. I'm a weapon that learned to make pancakes and assist with math homework. But beneath all of that," he lowered his gaze to his hands that had once held enemy lives in their grip. "Underneath all of that, I'm still precisely what the military forged me into." The kitchen fell silent, punctuated only by the steady tick of Mom's antique clock. Outside, Mrs. Peterson was walking her dog, likely contemplating dinner. A tableau of normal suburban evening activities. But within our home, something fundamental had irrevocably shifted. The nightmares never ceased. Dad quietly confessed. "I still awaken at 3 a.m., scanning for non-existent threats. I still inspect every room before bed. And I still meticulously plan exit strategies wherever we go. Your mother believes it's merely old habits, but it's much more than that. He rose and walked to the kitchen drawer where Mom kept the takeout menus. Instead of pulling out a pizza flyer, he reached towards the back and retrieved a small black notebook I had never seen before. I maintained records, he stated, flipping through pages covered in his precise military handwriting. Every potential threat in our neighborhood, every individual who might pose a risk to my family. License plates, daily routines, weaknesses, pressure points. A chill ran down my spine as the implications of his words settled in. You've been observing everyone. Everyone who matters. The drunk who lives 3 houses down and drives home every night at 11:30. The teenager across the street who deals marijuana from his bedroom window. The school board member who has been embezzling funds for 2 years. He closed the notebook and looked at me. And now I will add Blake Morrison to this list. Dad, you can't... I can't what? Protect my son? Allow some punk kid to terrorize my family while I stand by and feign civility? His voice grew harder, more controlled. That boy laid hands on you, Ethan. He hurt you. In my world, that means he's already dead. The words hung in the air like smoke from a discharged rifle. I stared at my father. This man, who had raised me with bedtime stories and birthday parties, and realized I was finally seeing his true self beneath the carefully constructed facade. Jake Coleman, the suburban insurance salesman, had been a fabrication. But Sergeant Coleman, the ghost sniper who had eliminated 47 enemy combatants without ever being detected, he was undeniably real. Dad, you're scaring me. The words escaped me before I could stop them. But they were true. Standing in our familiar kitchen, witnessing my father transform back into the soldier he once was, felt like watching a stranger emerge from someone I thought I knew completely. He blinked, and for a moment, the hardness in his eyes softened. I'm sorry, son. I didn't intend to. He ran a hand through his hair, a gesture I recognized from countless homework sessions and bedtime talks. This is precisely why I buried that part of myself. This is why I never wanted you to witness it. But it was too late. The mask had slipped, and we both knew there was no reaffixing it. The following morning at school, Blake awaited me at my locker. Word had spread about yesterday's bathroom incident, and students were already pulling out their phones, hoping for another viral moment. Well, Blake sneered. Look who decided to show up. Do you have my money, Coleman? I shook my head, my stomach clenching with familiar dread. That's a shame. Blake seized my backpack and upended its contents onto the floor. Textbooks, notebooks, and pens scattered across the hallway while students formed a circle around us. Guess I'll have to collect it another way. His fist landed in my kidney, forcing me to my knees. As I gasped for air, struggling to suppress nausea, Blake's voice echoed through the hallway. This is what happens when you don't settle your debts, everyone. Remember this. Connor kicked my scattered belongings further down the hall, while Derek stomped on my calculator, crushing it under his heel. Matt pulled out his phone and began recording, narrating like some twisted sports commentator. And Blake Morrison delivers another beatdown to Roosevelt High's Biggest Loser. I remained on the ground, gathering my broken things amidst the surrounding laughter and whispers. But as I reached for my history textbook, I noticed something that made my blood run cold. A shadow at the end of the hallway, tall, still watching. I looked up and saw him through the crowd of students. Dad. He stood by the main office doors in his work clothes, khakis and a polo shirt, making him look like any other suburban parent. But his posture was different. Predatory. Alert. He was studying Blake the way he had once studied enemy targets through a rifle scope. Our eyes met across the crowded hallway, and he gave me the slightest nod. Then he melted back into the throng of parents and visitors, disappearing like the ghost he had once been on foreign battlefields. Blake was too preoccupied, showing off for his audience to notice. He grabbed my collar and hauled me to my feet, his breath hot against my ear. "Tomorrow, I want $100, he whispered. "And if you don't have it, I'm going to ensure everyone in this school knows what a pathetic piece of garbage you truly are." He shoved me backward into the lockers and walked away, his crew trailing behind him like hyenas following a lion. The crowd dispersed, already bored now that the show was over. I gathered the rest of my belongings with shaking hands, my mind racing. Dad had been here. He had witnessed everything, and the look in his eyes. That afternoon, I found Dad in his workshop, a converted garage space, where he kept his hunting gear and tools. But today was different. Today, the workshop resembled a military planning room. Maps were spread across his workbench. Not hunting maps or hiking trails, but detailed satellite images of our town printed from Google Earth. Our neighborhood was marked with red pins, and I could discern notes written in his precise military handwriting. Morrison Blake, aged 16, 1247 Oakwood Drive, single mother, works double shifts at Walmart. Father unknown, possibly incarcerated. Below that, associates, Connor Walsh, Derek Price, Matt Sullivan, all from broken homes, pack mentality. Followers, not leaders. And at the bottom, threat assessment, escalating pattern of violence requires immediate intervention. Dad. I stood in the doorway, afraid to venture closer. He looked up from a photo he had been studying, a school yearbook picture of Blake that he must have obtained from the Roosevelt High website. "How was school today?" he asked, as if he hadn't watched me get beaten in the hallway 6 hours prior. "You were there?" I said quietly. "Yes, I was." He set down the photo and turned to face me. I needed to see for myself, to assess the situation properly. Blake Morrison just made the biggest mistake of his short, miserable life. Dad walked to a metal cabinet I had never seen open before. When he turned the combination lock, I heard the soft click of heavy mechanisms disengaging. Inside were items that did not belong in a suburban garage. Night vision goggles, tactical knives, and communication equipment that appeared military grade. "I made some calls today," he said, pulling out a manila folder. "Old contacts from my unit. People who owe me favors." He opened the folder and showed me a stack of documents, background checks, criminal records, financial information, all pertaining to Blake's family. Blake's mother, Angela Morrison, found herself 3 months behind on her rent obligations. The previous year, when Blake fractured his arm, she incurred medical debts that remained unpaid. Adding to her mounting troubles, she was precariously close to losing her driver's license due to accumulating traffic violations, an event that would inevitably lead to the loss of her employment. My father's voice, as he conveyed this information, was clinical and devoid of emotion. reminiscent of the tone he once adopted when briefing his unit before engaging high-value targets. Blake, it seemed, had a history of problematic behavior, including shoplifting, vandalism, and physical altercations. The school, out of sympathy for his challenging home life, had been lenient. However, a close circle of observers, including social services, probation officers, and school administrators, were keenly aware of his escalating pattern of violence and would undoubtedly be very interested in further incidents. "What do you intend to do?" Dad closed the folder and fixed his gaze on me, his eyes possessing an intensity that seemed to belong to a completely different person, a dangerous individual who had once made a livelihood hunting others. "I'm going to ensure Blake Morrison comprehends that there are predators in this world far more formidable than a 16-year-old bully, and some of these predators have families they are committed to protecting." He retrieved his phone and scrolled through a contact list I'd never seen, populated by names without surnames and numbers bearing international prefixes. It's time for Blake to learn that tormenting the wrong person doesn't merely result in detention or a stern lecture from the principal. His finger hesitated over a contact simply labeled Reaper. It signifies becoming the prey of someone extensively trained to extinguish lives from distances you cannot even begin to fathom. "Dad, please don't resort to anything rash," I whispered, observing him navigate contacts from a realm I had never imagined existed within our seemingly tranquil town. He lifted his head, and for a fleeting moment, his expression softened. "I have no intention of harming him, Ethan, but I will make certain he grasps that his actions carry significant consequences." The subsequent 48 hours felt as though I were living inside a spy movie. Each morning, Dad departed for work as usual, bidding Mom farewell with a kiss and clutching his coffee travel mug. Yet I harbored the growing certainty that his occupation extended beyond merely selling insurance policies. I began to notice subtle patterns. Dad's truck parked in various locations around town. A shadowy figure, clad in dark clothing, jogging past Blake's residence at dawn as I walked to school. A repair van with tinted windows consistently stationed across from Roosevelt High during lunch. He was engaged in surveillance, professional, military-grade surveillance. On Wednesday evening, I discovered him in the kitchen, engrossed in his laptop, meticulously scrutinizing social media profiles with the focused intensity of someone analyzing enemy intelligence. "Blake Morrison," he stated without diverting his gaze, 16 years old, resides with his mother Angela at 1247 Oakwood Drive. His father abandoned the family when Blake was 8. His mother works 2 jobs, day shift at Walmart and night shifts cleaning office buildings. He clicked through Blake's Instagram posts, dissecting each photograph as if it held military secrets. He's been acting out since his father's departure, beginning with minor infractions like talking back to teachers and skipping classes, escalating to shoplifting at 13 and vandalism by 14. The bullying began last year, coinciding with his mother losing her initial job. Dad opened another tab, revealing Angela Morrison's social media. She appeared tired, a woman in her late 30s, posting inspiring quotes about single motherhood and the demands of working multiple jobs to make ends meet. She remains oblivious to her son's conduct at school, Dad continued. She leaves for work at 7 a.m. and doesn't return until midnight. Blake essentially raises himself, which means he's learned that violence yields results because there's no one present to teach him otherwise. How do you possess all this information? I inquired. Dad's smile was chillingly professional. Because I spent 3 days observing their routine. I know Angela consistently procures coffee at the same gas station every morning at 7:15. I know Blake walks to school alone and habitually stops at the corner store to shoplift energy drinks. I know his mother weeps in her car for 5 minutes every day before commencing work. He closed the laptop and produced a voluminous manila folder brimming with printed documents, photographs, and handwritten notes. Connor Walsh lives with his grandmother because his parents are drug addicts. Derek Price's father is incarcerated for domestic violence. Matt Sullivan has been in foster care since he was 12. The clinical manner in which Dad recited these facts sent shivers down my spine. This was not merely information gathering, it was target acquisition. They are all troubled youths seeking a leader to follow, he observed. Blake is the alpha because he's the most aggressive. But remove him from the equation, and the entire pack will disintegrate. Remove him? My voice cracked. Dad, you're discussing children, even if they're messed up kids. I am discussing a threat to my family, he countered, his gray eyes locking onto mine. And threats require neutralization. That night, sleep eluded me. My thoughts constantly revolved around Blake, not as the tormentor he had been, but as a frightened boy whose father had abandoned him and whose mother exhausted herself simply to provide a roof over their heads. But then, the memory of the bathroom incident resurfaced, the searing pain in my ribs, the profound humiliation before 300 students. Perhaps Blake Morrison deserved whatever awaited him. Thursday morning, Dad did not report to work. Instead, he positioned his truck opposite Roosevelt High, scrutinizing the parking lot through a pair of binoculars that seemed far too sophisticated for casual birdwatching. When Blake arrived at school, Dad was there. When Blake departed for lunch, Dad followed at a discreet distance. When Blake and his group cornered a 7th grader behind the gymnasium, Dad observed from the woods, capturing photographs with a telephoto lens. By Thursday evening, Dad had meticulously compiled a comprehensive behavioral profile of Blake Morrison that would have impressed seasoned CIA analysts. Subject exhibits classic pack leader mentality. He read from his notes during dinner, while Mom chatted about her day at the hospital, utterly unaware that her husband had dedicated his day to military reconnaissance on a 16-year-old. An escalating pattern of violence suggests increasing desperation. Home situation is deteriorating. Mother has missed 2 rent payments. Utilities are threatened with disconnection. Subject is likely feeling pressure to assert dominance as compensation for powerlessness at home. That's nice, honey, Mom remarked absently, passing me the mashed potatoes. Dad's gaze met mine across the table. Psychological pressure points identified, ready to proceed to phase 2. After Mom retired for the night, Dad presented me with the photographs he had taken. Blake shoving the 7th grader, Blake and his crew smoking behind the school, Blake vandalizing a teacher's car. Evidence, Dad stated simply, enough to ensure his expulsion, arrest, or both. But that is not how we will approach this. What do you mean? I asked, my blood running cold. Dad retrieved his phone and displayed a text message he had already composed but not yet sent. Blake, we need to talk behind the school. Midnight. Come alone. A friend. You're going to meet him? I questioned, my voice barely audible. I'm going to introduce myself, Dad replied, and explain to Blake Morrison precisely what transpires when someone harms my family. His finger hovered over the send button. Tomorrow night, Blake will learn that there are consequences in this world that extend far beyond detention and parent-teacher conferences. He will learn that some fathers don't merely make pancakes and assist with homework. He pressed send. Some fathers were trained by the United States military to eliminate threats with extreme prejudice. And Blake Morrison has just become threat number 1. Blake stared at the text message for the 3rd time, his hands trembling slightly as he sat on his unmade bed. The house was empty. Mom had already left for her night shift and wouldn't return until after sunrise. Blake, we need to talk behind the school. Midnight. Come alone. A friend, he muttered. What kind of sick joke is this? Yet a cold dread had settled in his stomach. Someone had his number. Someone was watching him. He'd been plagued by an unsettling sensation all week, a feeling of being observed, of shadows moving when they shouldn't. Connor had scoffed when Blake mentioned it, dismissing him as paranoid, but the feeling persisted. Meanwhile, I sat in my bedroom, observing Dad make his final preparations. He had changed into all black attire. Tactical pants, a long-sleeved shirt, and combat boots that made no sound as he moved. The suburban insurance salesman had completely vanished, replaced by something evocative of a war zone. You don't have to do this, I said, though we both knew that was no longer true. Dad meticulously checked his gear one last time. Night vision goggles, zip ties, a knife that appeared capable of severing bone. There was no gun. He had explained that firearms left too much evidence and made too much noise. A frightened 16-year-old is more dangerous than a dead one, he had stated. Dead martyrs inspire revenge. Terrified bullies merely wish to disappear. At 11:47 p.m., Dad's phone buzzed with a response from Blake. Who is this? How did you get this number? Dad smiled, a cold, predatory expression I had never witnessed before, and typed back. Someone who has been watching you harm innocent people. Someone who believes it's time you learned what real fear feels like. He added, You have 10 minutes to reach the meeting spot, or I come to your house instead. Your mother works until 6 a.m., doesn't she? That's a long time to be alone. My blood ran cold as I read that message. Dad was no longer merely threatening Blake. He was engaging in psychological warfare that could traumatize a child for life. But then I recalled the bathroom incident. The impact of Blake's fist against my ribs. 3 months of daily humiliation. Perhaps Blake Morrison truly needed to comprehend what real fear entailed. At 11:58 p.m., Dad exited the house through the back door, moving with the silent efficiency of someone who had once infiltrated enemy camps undetected. I watched from my bedroom window as he vanished into the darkness like smoke. Blake was already at the school, seeking refuge behind the dumpsters, constantly checking his phone every 30 seconds. In his grip was a baseball bat, a chosen means of protection. Though his hands trembled so violently, he could barely maintain his hold. The school parking lot lay deserted, save for the security lights casting elongated shadows across the dark asphalt. Blake habitually glanced over his shoulder, startling at every minor sound. The earlier bravado he displayed in the school hallways had completely vanished. replaced by an unnerving apprehension. Punctually at midnight, a voice, unmistakably his dad's, emanated from the darkness directly behind him. Blake Morrison. Blake spun around instantly, raising the bat, yet he perceived nothing. Only the empty parking lot and the shifting shadows met his gaze. "Who's there?" His voice cracked, reminiscent of a young child's. "Show yourself. Drop the bat." The voice now originated from an alternative direction, perhaps 20 feet to his left. Blake wheeled towards the sound, but once again found no one. I said, "Drop it." This time, the voice was conspicuously directly behind him. Blake spun around with such intensity that he nearly lost his balance, wildly swinging the bat at empty air. His breathing quickened, becoming fraught with panic. "Please," he whispered. "I don't know what you want. I don't know who you are. But I know who you are, Blake." Dad emerged from the shadows, positioning himself approximately 10 feet away, close enough to be discernible, yet sufficiently distant to remain secure. "I know everything about you." Under the dim security illumination, Dad appeared as if he had stepped from Blake's most unsettling nightmares. Tall and silent, dressed in black, his face partially obscured by shadow, he moved with the controlled grace of a predator, making not a single sound. Blake raised the bat with both hands, attempting to project an image of menace. "Stay back. I'm warning you." "You're warning me?" Dad's soft laughter was chilling. "Blake, I've been watching you for a week. I know you stop at Miller's Corner Store every morning and steal energy drinks. I know you smoke behind the gym during fourth period. I know you've been beating up a kid named Ethan Coleman." Blake's face lost all color. "How do you—" "I know your mother works 2 jobs to pay rent on that little house on Oakwood Drive. I know she doesn't get home until dawn. I know you're all alone right now, just like you are every night." Dad took a step closer, and Blake instinctively recoiled backward. "I know about Connor Walsh and Derek Price and Matt Sullivan. I know where they live, where they go to school, what time they walk home. I know everything about everyone you care about. What do you want?" Blake's voice was now barely a whisper. Dad ceased his movement, standing perfectly still, allowing the silence to prolong until Blake trembled with profound fear. "I want you to understand something very important," Dad finally stated. "Ethan Coleman is under my protection now, and people who hurt things I protect, they disappear." Blake dropped the bat. It clattered against the asphalt, the sound echoing across the empty parking lot. "I don't know what you're talking about," he stammered. "I never heard anyone named—" "Don't lie to me, Blake." Dad's voice lowered to an almost inaudible whisper, yet somehow became even more terrifying. "I was there Tuesday when you beat him in the bathroom. I watched you humiliate him in front of 300 students. I have photographs of every bruise you've put on his body." Dad produced his phone and displayed to Blake a remarkably clear image of him shoving Ethan into the lockers. Digital evidence of assault and battery. More than enough to get you arrested, expelled, and sent to juvenile detention. "But I'm not going to call the police, Blake." Blake was visibly crying now, tears streaming down his cheeks as he grappled with the realization of his complete entrapment. "I'm going to handle this myself." Blake wiped his eyes with the back of his hand, attempting to stem the flow of tears, which relentlessly continued. Standing in that desolate parking lot, confronted by a man who seemed to possess knowledge of his every secret, he felt an unprecedented smallness, Please, he whispered. I'm sorry. I'll leave Ethan alone. I promise. I'll never touch him again. Dad circled him, leisurely, like a wolf scrutinizing wounded prey. Oh, Blake, you think this is about promises? You think this is about saying sorry and everything goes back to normal? I mean it, Blake pleaded desperately. I won't bully anyone anymore. I'll be good, I swear. You'll be good. Dad ceased his circling and directly faced Blake. Tell me something. When Ethan Coleman begged you to stop, did you listen? When he promised to bring you money, when he tried to avoid you in the hallways, when he never fought back, did any of that make you show mercy? Blake's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. No words materialized. That's what I thought. Dad produced his phone again and scrolled through additional photographs. This is from Monday. You dumping his lunch tray. This is from Wednesday. You and your friends cornering him by the lockers. This is from today. You kicking a 7th grader behind the gym. Each photograph was remarkably clear, professionally captured from angles that unequivocally demonstrated Dad had been observing everything. You see, Blake, you've established a pattern of choosing victims who can't fight back, who won't tell on you, who suffer in silence while you build your reputation on their pain. Dad put the phone away and took a step closer. Blake attempted to retreat, but stumbled over his own feet. So, here's what's going to happen. You're going to learn what it feels like to be hunted, to be watched, to never know when the predator is coming for you. I don't understand, Blake stammered. Starting tomorrow, you're going to feel eyes on you everywhere you go. In the hallways, walking to school, sitting in your house alone at night. You're going to wonder if that shadow moved, if that car has been following you, if the footsteps behind you are just coincidence. Dad's voice was hypnotic, terrifying. You're going to check your phone and find messages from numbers you don't recognize. You're going to see things moved in your room, evidence that someone was there while you slept. You're going to realize that your safe spaces aren't safe anymore. You can't do this, Blake whispered. This is stalking. This is illegal. Dad laughed, a sound that caused Blake to flinch. Illegal? Like beating up kids half your size? Like stealing from convenience stores? Like vandalizing school property? He produced a manila folder, thick with documents. I have enough evidence to destroy your life, Blake. Criminal charges, school expulsion, social services investigations. Your mother would lose her jobs dealing with the scandal. You'd end up in juvenile detention with kids who make you look like a choir boy. Blake was shaking uncontrollably now, his tough guy facade utterly shattered. But I'm not going to do any of that, Dad continued. Instead, I'm going to teach you a lesson about consequences, about what happens when you pick on someone whose family actually cares enough to fight back. Dad reached into his jacket and extracted a small device, a GPS tracker, the kind employed for hunting or surveillance. This is going on your backpack tomorrow morning while you're in first period, he stated casually. I'll know everywhere you go, everyone you talk to, every move you make. If you try to remove it, if you tell anyone about it, if you even think about retaliating against Ethan. He allowed the unspoken threat to linger in the air. Your mother gets home at 6:15 a.m. every morning. She makes coffee, checks the mail, then showers before going to bed. She sleeps until noon, then gets up and goes to her day job at Walmart. She has no idea that her son is a violent predator who terrorizes innocent kids. Blake's face became deathly pale. Don't you dare involve my mother. Your mother is already involved, Blake. She raised you. She failed to teach you right from wrong. She's working 2 jobs to support a son who repays her sacrifice by becoming everything that's wrong with this world. Dad stepped even closer, and Blake detected his cologne. Something expensive and subtle that seemed incongruous with the terrifying situation. But here's the beautiful part, Dad whispered. I don't have to tell her anything, because you're going to change all by yourself. You're going to stop bullying. You're going to leave Ethan alone. You're going to become a model student. Why would I do that? Dad smiled, and it was the most frightening expression Blake had ever witnessed. Because if you don't, I'm going to make you disappear. The words hung in the cold night air like an inescapable verdict. Not kill you, Blake. That would be too easy, too quick. I'm going to make you irrelevant, invisible. I'm going to systematically destroy every relationship, every opportunity, every chance at happiness you might ever have. Your friends will abandon you. Girls will avoid you. Teachers will give up on you. Your mother will be so ashamed she'll wish she'd never had you. Blake was now openly weeping, tears and snot streaming down his face. And the whole time, you'll know that somewhere out there, someone is watching. Someone who could end your pathetic little life any time he wanted to, but chooses to let you live with the knowledge that you're completely powerless. Dad checked his watch. It's 12:17 a.m. You have exactly 3 minutes to get home before I decide you're not taking this seriously enough. Blake turned and bolted, stumbling across the parking lot, abandoning his baseball bat. Dad watched him depart, then retrieved the bat, examining it as if contemplating its addition to a trophy collection. Yet the lesson was far from over. It was merely commencing. That night, Blake found no sleep. Every shadow beyond his bedroom window assumed the menacing appearance of a watchful figure. Every creak of the old house echoed like approaching footsteps. When his alarm sounded at 7 a.m., he was already dressed and seated on his bed, staring fixedly at the door. The walk to school felt like an agonizing death march. Each passing car could be the enigmatic man from the previous night. Every individual on the sidewalk might be observing him. Blake's head constantly swiveled, checking behind him, scanning rooftops, flinching at his own shadow. But the true terror began during first period math class. Blake was attempting to concentrate on his algebraic equations when a sensation akin to something brushing against his backpack startled him. He rapidly pivoted, but nothing out of the ordinary met his gaze. Merely his classmates diligently taking notes and Mrs. Henderson engrossed in writing on the whiteboard. During the passing period, he compulsively examined his backpack. While everything appeared normal, it inexplicably felt altered, heavier, as if an extra item had been concealed within. By lunchtime, Blake had devolved into a nervous wreck. He occupied his usual table alone. Though Connor, Derek, and Matt had all made attempts to engage him, he had sharply told them to leave him be. He couldn't risk entangling his friends in the nightmare he had inadvertently stumbled into. It was then that he observed me traversing the cafeteria with my lunch tray. For 3 months, this particular moment had been Blake's favorite part of the day. The opportunity to publicly humiliate me before hundreds of students, to assert his dominance, to experience a sense of power when other aspects of his existence felt beyond his control. But today presented a stark contrast. Today, Blake's gaze met mine, and he perceived something that caused his stomach to clench with dread. I was not walking with my customary defeated posture. My head was held high, my shoulders were straight, and when our eyes connected across the bustling cafeteria, I offered a smile. It wasn't a friendly smile, nor a frightened one. It was a knowing smile. Blake's hands began to tremble so violently that he dropped his sandwich. In that instant, an undeniable truth, which had been consistently before him, finally crystallized. The enigmatic man who had terrorized him the previous night, the professional stalker who possessed knowledge of his every secret, the predator who had vowed to make him vanish. It was my father. Blake recoiled from the table with such force that his chair toppled over. Other students turned to stare, but their attention was of no consequence to him. He stumbled towards the exit, his vision blurring with panic. I trailed him, not aggressively or overtly, but simply walking in the same direction, maintaining the same distance, as if our shared destination were a mere coincidence. Blake, glancing back, saw me following. He broke into a run. I maintained my steady pace. Blake burst through the school's front doors and continued running until he reached the parking lot where he had been confronted 12 hours earlier. Only then did he stop, gasping for air, and turn around. I stood approximately 20 feet away, hands in my pockets, exuding complete serenity. "You figured it out," I stated quietly. Blake's mouth opened and closed, but no words emerged. He appeared on the verge of collapsing. "My dad's been gone since 6 a.m., I continued, stepping closer. "He's at work selling insurance policies and pretending to be a normal suburban father. But you and I both know he's not normal, don't we, Blake?" "Your father?" Blake's voice was barely a whisper. "That man last night was your father?" I nodded. "Jake Coleman, retired Special Forces, 47 confirmed kills. He could eliminate you from 800 yards away and never lose a minute of sleep." Blake stumbled backward. "You can't prove that. No one will believe you." I retrieved my phone and displayed a photo I had captured that morning. Dad loading his surveillance equipment into the trunk of his car, clad in his work attire, yet surrounded by military-grade gear. "I don't need to prove anything to anyone else," I affirmed. "I just need you to understand that everything changed last night." The balance of power had shifted completely. Blake was weeping again, but this time it was different. This wasn't fear. It was despair. The crushing realization that he had antagonized someone whose family possessed the genuine skills and resources to bring about his end. "For 3 months, you made my life hell," I continued. "You beat me up, humiliated me, stole from me, threatened me, and the whole time you thought I was helpless. You thought I was just some weak kid with no one to protect him." I stepped closer, and Blake winced. "But here's what you never understood, Blake. My dad didn't raise me to be weak. He raised me to be patient. He taught me that violence is the last resort, that there are always better ways to solve problems." "I'm sorry," Blake whispered. "I'm so sorry. I'll never touch you again. I swear." "Oh, I know you won't," I remarked, "because now you understand what happens to people who hurt Jay Coleman's family. Now you know that every move you make is being watched by someone who was trained to kill people like you before you even knew people like him existed. Blake surveyed the empty parking lot, as if searching for escape routes, but there was nowhere to flee. "What do you want?" he asked desperately. I scrutinized his face, the same face that had sneered at me daily for 3 months, that had laughed while I cleaned up my spilled lunch, that had smiled while his friends documented my humiliation. "I want you to remember this feeling," I finally declared. "This helplessness, this fear, this knowledge that someone bigger and stronger than you can destroy your life anytime they want to." Blake nodded frantically. "I'll remember. I promise I'll remember." "Good." I turned to walk back towards the school, then paused. "Oh, and Blake, my dad wanted me to give you a message." Blake's face paled. "What message?" I smiled the same cold smile I had inherited from my father. "Welcome to the rest of your life." 3 weeks unfolded within a strange new reality none of us could have foreseen. Blake Morrison had become a mere shadow of his former self. The swaggering bully who had once commanded fear and respect throughout Roosevelt High had been supplanted by a nervous, jumpy kid who flinched at sudden noises and perpetually looked over his shoulder. He had ceased bullying everyone, not merely me, but the 7th graders, the quiet children, even the teachers he used to openly defy. Connor, Derek, and Matt had attempted to comprehend the change in their leader, but Blake offered no explanation. He simply mumbled excuses and avoided them whenever possible. The GPS tracker Dad had alluded to proved to be a psychological maneuver rather than a physical reality. Blake spent countless hours each day meticulously searching his backpack, his locker, his bedroom, convinced he was under surveillance. The paranoia was consuming him. Yet, it was effective. For the first time in months, I could navigate school without fear. I could eat lunch undisturbed, use the bathroom without concern for ambushes, and focus on my classes, rather than constantly scanning for danger. Dad had triumphed. His adversary had been neutralized without a single act of physical violence. So why did I feel such profound emptiness? The answer arrived on a Thursday afternoon, when I discovered Blake sitting alone behind the school, in the very spot where he once smoked with his crew. He was weeping, not the terrified sobs from that night in the parking lot, but quiet, defeated tears, indicative of something more profound than mere fear. He looked up upon hearing my footsteps and immediately tensed, ready to bolt. But something in my expression must have conveyed that I wasn't there to gloat. "Please," he whispered, "I haven't done anything wrong. I've been good, just like he said. I haven't bothered anyone." I settled onto the concrete steps about 10 feet away from him, close enough to converse, yet far enough to avoid appearing menacing. "I know," I stated quietly. We sat in silence for a few minutes. Two adolescents who had been adversaries for months but were now bound by something neither of us fully comprehended. "Your dad," Blake finally began. "He's really—" "Yeah, he really is." Blake wiped his eyes with his sleeve. "I keep thinking he's going to come back, that this is all just the beginning and he's planning something worse." "He's not," I replied, realizing the truth in my words. "Dad doesn't make empty threats, but he also doesn't waste energy on neutralized targets. You're not a threat anymore, so you're not on his radar. Then why do I still feel like he's watching me?" I studied Blake's face, truly observing him for the first time in months. Without the cruel smile and aggressive posture, he appeared younger than 16, scared, lost, broken. "Because you're not afraid of my dad anymore," I said slowly, comprehending it as I spoke. "You're afraid of yourself. You're afraid of what you were becoming." Blake's eyes widened. "What do you mean?" "Before my dad intervened." "Where were you heading, Blake? Where does a kid who beats up smaller kids and steals from stores and threatens people end up?" The question lingered in the air between us. We both knew the answer. "Prison," Blake whispered. "Or dead. Or both." "My dad didn't just stop you from bullying me," I continued. "He stopped you from destroying your own life. He showed you what it looks like when someone with real power decides you're a problem that needs to be solved." Blake remained silent for a long moment. "Your dad could have just called the police or the school or my mom. Why did he—" "Because none of that would have worked," I interrupted. "You'd have gotten suspended, maybe expelled. But you wouldn't have understood why it was wrong. You'd have just gotten angry and found someone else to take it out on. So, he terrorized me instead." "He showed you consequences," I corrected. "Real consequences, from someone who had the power to follow through. Someone who cared enough about his family to become the monster you needed him to be." Blake gazed out across the empty football field, processing my words. "I hate him," he said quietly. "I hate your dad for what he did to me. I know, but I also—" He struggled with the words. "I think he might have saved my life." We sat in silence again, watching clouds drift across the late afternoon sky. "Blake," I finally began, "what's your mom like? I mean, really like?" His face softened for the first time since I had known him. "She's amazing. She works 2 jobs to keep us fed and housed. She never complains, never asks for anything. When I was little, she used to read to me every night before bed, even when she was exhausted. She doesn't know about the bullying." Blake shook his head. "She doesn't know about any of it. The shoplifting, the vandalism, the fighting. I've been lying to her for 2 years, letting her think I'm this good kid who just happens to struggle in school." "Why?" I asked, responding to his implied question about his mother's well-being. "Because she has enough worries without discovering her son is a complete failure." The anguish in his voice was raw and unfiltered. For the initial time, I perceived Blake Morrison not as my tormentor, but as a frightened adolescent who had lost his direction and was uncertain how to retrieve it. "You're not garbage," I stated. Blake let out a bitter laugh. "Your father would dispute that." "My father neutralized the threat," I countered. "But he also recognized something redeemable. Otherwise, he would have utterly destroyed you. He could have arranged for your arrest, expulsion, or placement in juvenile detention. Instead, he offered you a chance to reform. Some chance. I'm terrified to step outside my house." "Then don't leave it," I declared, rising to my feet. "Stay at home with your mother. Assist her with the household expenses instead of exacerbating her difficulties. Be the son she believes you are, rather than the predator you are becoming." I began to walk back towards the school, then paused and turned around. "Blake, my father isn't observing you anymore. But I am. And if you ever revert to your former ways, if you ever harm another innocent person—" I let the menace hang unfinished, just as my father had instructed me. Blake nodded, comprehending perfectly. The balance of authority had shifted anew. However, this time, it felt like the genesis of something superior, rather than merely the conclusion of something dreadful. 6 months later, I stood in the same exact spot where Blake had habitually cornered me by the lockers. Yet, everything had undergone a profound transformation. The hallways that had once resonated like a war zone now felt like what they were intended to be. Simply a school where young individuals learned, matured, and discerned their future selves. Blake Morrison was still present, but he was different, quieter, more reflective. He had commenced tutoring younger students in mathematics, an activity that astonished everyone familiar with his previous reputation. His academic performance had significantly improved, and teachers who had once dreaded his presence in their classrooms now lauded his concentration and dedication. However, the most astonishing alteration was the dynamic between Blake and me. It started subtly, a nod in the corridor, a quiet apology when he inadvertently bumped into me. Then gradually something that resembled respect began to emerge. One late spring afternoon, I was walking home alone when a group of older teenagers from the neighboring town cornered me behind the gas station. They saw trouble, perhaps some easy money, and certainly someone smaller than themselves to bully. "Hey, rich boy," the leader sneered, scrutinizing my new backpack. "Let's see what you've got in there." I was meticulously calculating escape routes when a voice materialized from behind them. "Is there a problem here?" Blake emerged from the shadows, and I almost failed to recognize him. He had grown 3 inches and gained 20 pounds of muscle. Not the soft bulk of someone who merely overate, but the lean strength of an individual who had been diligently working out. His shoulders were broader, his posture more self-assured, yet his voice remained calm and controlled. "This doesn't concern you," the leader stated. However, I could detect uncertainty creeping into his tone. "Actually, it does." Blake moved closer, and something in his body language caused all 3 older teenagers to take a step back. "See, Ethan's under my protection now, so if you have an issue with him, you have an issue with me." The leader scrutinized Blake, deliberating whether this confrontation was worthwhile. Whatever he perceived in Blake's eyes persuaded him it wasn't. "Whatever, man. We were just leaving anyway." They departed, muttering empty threats, leaving me alone with the boy who had terrorized me for 3 months. "Thanks," I murmured quietly. Blake nodded. "Your dad taught me something significant that night." "What's that?" "That protecting people is what makes you strong. Hurting them just makes you weak." We walked together for a few blocks in a comfortable silence before Blake spoke once more. "I never told you about my father," he began. "You don't have to." "No, I want to." Blake ceased walking and turned to face me. "He abandoned us when I was 8, just packed a bag one day and drove away. Never called, never wrote, never sent birthday cards or Christmas presents. Simply vanished. I waited for him to continue. For years, I believed it was my fault, that I wasn't good enough, wasn't strong enough, wasn't worth staying for. So, I decided I would make myself something to be feared instead. If people couldn't love me, at least they would respect me. Blake kicked at a loose stone on the sidewalk. "But your dad showed me what a true father looks like. Someone who would go to war for his child. Someone who would transform into a monster if that's what it took to safeguard his family." "Dad's not a monster," I asserted. Perhaps not to you, but to me that night. Blake shivered at the recollection. He was the most terrifying thing I had ever encountered. And do you know what the peculiar part is? What? I was envious. Even while he was terrorizing me, a part of me was thinking, this is what it looks like when someone loves you enough to fight for you. We reached the corner where our paths diverged. Blake towards the modest house on Oakwood Drive, and I towards our suburban neighborhood with its pristine picket fences and immaculate lawns. Blake, I said as he began to turn, what are your plans after graduation? He smiled, the first genuine smile I had ever witnessed from him. Community college first, then perhaps transfer to a 4-year institution. I'm considering social work, helping kids who are headed down the same path I was. That's good, I said. That's really good. Yeah, well, Blake shrugged. I figure I owe the universe some good karma after all the damage I caused. That evening at dinner, I narrated the incident behind the gas station to Dad. He listened attentively, without interruption, his gray eyes thoughtful. Blake defended you? He inquired, when I concluded. Yeah, it was unexpected. Dad put down his fork and looked at me with gravity. Son, do you recall what I told you about violence being the ultimate recourse? I nodded. Sometimes the threat of violence is sufficient to avert actual violence. Sometimes demonstrating to someone what real repercussions entail teaches them to make superior decisions. And sometimes, he paused, meticulously selecting his words, sometimes completely dismantling someone is the only means to help them reconstruct themselves into something improved. Do you believe Blake is better now? Dad smiled, not the cold, predatory smile I had witnessed that night in his workshop, but the warm, proud smile of a father observing his son mature. I think Blake Morrison learned something that night that most people never comprehend. He stated, he learned that actions carry consequences, that choices are paramount, that the person you decide to be today dictates the person you will become tomorrow. And what about me? What did I learn? Dad reached across the table and squeezed my shoulder. You learned that family protects family, that sometimes the correct choice isn't the effortless choice, and that true strength isn't about inflicting pain. It's about possessing the power to hurt others and consciously choosing not to. Later that night, I discovered Dad in his workshop, but it appeared different than it had 6 months prior. The maps and surveillance photographs were gone, replaced by ordinary garage items. Tools, hunting gear, Mom's gardening supplies. The military equipment had been securely put away again. Hopefully for good. Dad, I stood in the doorway, uncertain how to articulate my thoughts. What's on your mind, buddy? Do you ever regret it? What you did to Blake? Dad remained silent for a long moment, cleaning a hunting rifle that had likely not been fired in months. Regret is the incorrect word, he finally stated. I did what was necessary to protect my family. But I also assisted the kid who was destroying himself in learning how to be better. That is not something to regret. But you scared him, really scared him. Yes, I did. And perhaps that's what it took to reach him. Perhaps fear was the only language Blake Morrison understood at that juncture in his life. Dad set down the rifle and turned to face me. Ethan, in Special Forces, we had a saying. Sometimes you have to be the villain in someone else's story to be the hero in your own. I became Blake's villain so I could remain your father. 6 months later, at Roosevelt High's graduation ceremony, I watched Blake Morrison traverse the stage to receive his diploma. His mother occupied the front row, shedding tears of pride and relief. He had concluded the year with a 3.8 GPA and a full scholarship to the state university. As he shook the principal's hand, Blake scanned the crowd and located my family. For a fleeting instant, his eyes met Dad's. Blake nodded once, a gesture of understanding, perhaps even gratitude. Dad reciprocated the nod, and I recognized that sometimes the most pivotal lessons are not imparted in classrooms or acquired from textbooks. Sometimes they are taught in deserted parking lots at midnight by fathers who love their children enough to transform into whatever they need to be to ensure their safety. Blake Morrison had chosen the wrong person to provoke, but ultimately, that might have been the best mistake he ever made.